we'll try to do a round robin because I know Cindy likes to do round robins. So I'll breeze through my stories as quickly as possible. Now, here's what I want to do. I want to show the whiteboard, existing whiteboard. If you read the minutes, I mean the agenda, it's all about the Simons again. I'm going to start it off, and specifically it's about David Simon. That's the oldest Simon child. But before we get to that, if you recall, last week we were talking about Daniel Simon. Remember the infant that died pretty early? You guys remember that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, well, during the meeting, Sister brought out that it was Holy Thursday that Daniel died. And so I was thinking February, and I don't know why I thought February, because in my records it was March. Here's his obituary, dug it out. He was 8 weeks old when he died. Okay, let's see, what did I have to say about that? Other than that he did die on, thanks to Sister Margaret Mary's memory, he did die on Holy Thursday, which was April 14th. So everything's been authenticated. There's his obituary. I'm not going to read it. But what do I want to say? I want to say what is most likely cause of death. The obituary doesn't say what is cause of death, but if we put two and two together, 8 weeks, let's see. So he died during surgery. He had surgery as an 8-week-old baby. And here's the thing about surgery and babies. You only have surgery on babies when they're 8 weeks old if it's a life or death situation. Infant surgery was risky, and anesthesia for newborns was still controversial. Yet certain conditions left doctors no choice. And here's the most common reasons a baby that age would have surgery. Life-threatening congenital defects. Okay, I'm not going to read about that, but really the most likely cause problem that 8-week would have is intestinal atresia obstruction. Baby presents with vomiting, distension, can't pass stool. The gut twist, it's an emergency because the bowel can die in hours. So that's what would have probably happened. Esophageal atresia, baby can't swallow, chokes on saliva. So it was an emergency situation. More than likely, they had rushed him to the hospital suddenly, and they had to make a decision to how to treat. And now, what I wanted to also say about Mercy Hospital back in 1964, or was I guess it was 1960 that we were talking about Daniel, was a pretty good hospital. Families and doctors in 1960 faced brutal choices. The surgeon recommended operating on an 8-week-old meant the condition would kill him without it. Post-op mortality was higher than today, but it was the only shot. Daniel lived 7 weeks, 5 days. For many of these defects, babies did fine for a few weeks, then crashed when the obstruction became too complete or they got too dehydrated. So operating at 8 weeks wasn't unusual. It was often when the problem became obvious and fatal. The tragedy is that even with surgery, 1960s NICU care, natal, I guess, intensive care unit, infection control, nutrition support were limited compared to now. Following surgery could mean complications like infection, electrolyte issues. So what we're doing here is we're trying to analyze the obituary because the obituary did not say specifically what the cause was. But this is probably the most likely reason for surgery at 8 weeks, like that. Sister's memory of being called out on Holy Thursday night lines up emergency surgery. Then he passed later that Thursday, April 14th, 1960. Okay, I thought you all might be interested to know.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah,
Thank-
that's quite all right. Now, what we're going to do, what I want to do is show these three pictures here and tell a story. I actually got two stories. These are the pictures that I want you to look at while I read the story. And this one too, because the story refers to these pictures. And of course, all of these pictures are part of Sister Margaret Mary's memorabilia. All right, the story. The title is The One Who Stepped Back, Stark County Probate Court, March 19th, 2001. David Simon carried three pictures that morning, but none of them were in his pocket. First one was 1960, a painted pony. And we're going to go picture one, picture two, picture three. And you can probably figure it out from the description. First one was 1960, a painted pony in the front yard at 2314 10th Street Northwest. He was maybe 4, wearing a cowboy hat and chaps that were too big. With his arms locked around his baby brother, Doug. Kathleen Ann had said, "Smile," from behind the camera. He did. He also held on tighter. Doug was one, squirming, and David had already decided he was responsible for keeping him from falling. The second photo was a year or two later. Pink towels, steam on the mirror. Denny on the left with the grin. David in the middle, mid-sentence. Doug on the right with something red clutched on his chest. 3 Simon boys in a tub. Kathleen Ann just outside the frame with a towel, probably. Daniel Scott hadn't been born yet. The world was small and warm in theirs. The third was December 1995. His own couch at 22120. Now, notice the time lapse here, 1995. His own couch at 2120 Keltonshire Avenue, Columbus. Dan in glasses, Beth with her gap-toothed grin, Peter, Kate with the blue bow, and Maggie at 7 weeks old, asleep in a boppy. David Simon family, Kathleen's oldest son, back of the photo said he built what he lost. And of course, that's caption from Sister Margaret Mary. He thought of all three while he sat in the back of courtroom 2, hands folded. It was March 19th, 2001. The judge was about to sign the final entry on the estate of Clement H. Siegfried. Clem died October 18th, 1999, 8 months after Thelma on February 4th. Clem's son, Robert James, had been gone since 1993. David's mother, Kathleen Ann, since 1990. Clem never updated the will after Robert died. When it was read, none of Kathleen's children were named. Carol Ann Wachtel, Thelma's daughter, by her first husband, Laverne Kohler, was executrix, not heir. When Douglas, Dennis, and Timothy Simon, plus Jean Klein, Thelma's other daughter by Laverne Kohler, objected to the will's terms, Carol asked the court for instructions. The 5 of them worked it out outside the courtroom. Daniel had already stepped back. Sister Margaret Mary noticed it first. She wrote to Chuck and Emily on August 23rd, 1996. I wondered whether you knew that Denny Simon got married on July 20th, 1996. Did you know that David and Kathy have 5 children? Dan, Beth, Pete, Kate, and Maggie. And we remember we had the picture there with those. None of the children came to the wedding. Clem and Thelma made the reception. Jean Klein and sister were at the church. David's chair was empty. So were 5 smaller ones. The court advised him to seek counsel. He didn't. He signed the voluntary withdrawal from the final settlement months earlier. No fight. He told Doug once years before, Grandpa wrote what he wrote. I'm okay with it. The judgment came down. Douglas, Denny, Klein is, and Timothy. 12.5% of the residual assets each, plus $2,500 that was in the will. Gerald Ann Wachtel and Jean Thelma's daughters by Laverne Fuller, 31.5% each. David Simon, nothing. No one was surprised. Jean had seen it coming since 1996 from her pew at Community Christian Church when David's 5 kids didn't show. Maybe she'd seen it coming since the pony photo, since David learned to hold on by letting go. The judge asked if all parties understood. The lawyers nodded. David stood up in the back, nodded once to no one in particular, and left before the stamp hit the journal entry. He never blamed Clement. He never blamed Clem. He never blamed Thelma. Nobody knew how Clem and Thelma commingled their assets in those last years. Maybe Kathleen's share was already gone to medical bills. Maybe Clem figured the boys were provided for. Maybe he just never got around to it after 1993. He'd been grandma to Daniel Scott for 8 weeks in 1960. From October to December, he'd been the oldest brother in a cowboy hat, holding Doug on a pony, while Kathleen Ann's daughters from her stepmother's first marriage watched. He'd been the middle kid in a tub. He was now the father of 5 who weren't in their uncle's wedding and weren't named in their great-grandfather's will. He stepped back in 1996. He stepped back in 2001. Walking out of the Stark County Courthouse, he figured some promises, like the one he made on that pony, you keep by stepping back. He had 2 inheritance. One was settled that day, 31.5% to each of Thelma's daughters, 12.5% to each of Kathleen's sons who fought. Nothing to the one who didn't. The other was 3 photos and Kathleen's lap. The other inheritance was 3 photos in Kathleen's lap. That was settlement enough. Okay, I have an epilogue to that story. I don't expect anybody to comment. Epilogue 2120 Keltonshire Avenue, that's the number of the street. Columbus, Ohio, March 19th, 2001, late afternoon. David Simon didn't drive straight home from Stark County. He took 77 south to 71, then sat in the left lane doing 64 and a 65. The envelope from the court was in his glove box. Journal entry, case number 99-ES-XXXX. Estate of Clement H. Sigfrid. He wouldn't open it. He already knew the numbers. He pulled into the driveway at 2120 Keltonshire just as the school bus hissed past. Maggie was 5 now. Kindergarten, half days. She beat him to the door. Daddy, Mrs. Harmon said, my story about the bathtub was very descriptive. He picked her up. She still fit under his chin. What bathtub? The one with Uncle Denny and Uncle Doug. You told me about it with the pink tiles. Kathy was at the kitchen table, bills spread out, a red pen in her hand. She looked up. She didn't ask how the court went. She'd known the answer since 1996, since the wedding invitation came and stayed on the fridge until it didn't. Dan was 15 at track. Beth, 13 at a friend's. Pete, 11 in the backyard with a soccer ball. Kate, 8 doing homework at the counter. 5 kids. None of them named in Clem's will. None of them at Denny's wedding. None of them surprised when Dad came home empty-handed. He set Maggie down and hung his suit jacket on the back of a chair. Jacket was the same one he wore to Denny's wedding. Except he hadn't worn it to Denny's wedding. He hadn't gone. Kathleen finally spoke. So it's done? Yeah, he opened the fridge, milk, leftover meatloaf, a school photo order form. Doug gets 12 and a half. Denny gets 12 and a half. Timmy gets 12 and a half. Carol and Jean get 31 and a half each. And you? He closed the fridge. I got to drive home. She didn't say, I'm sorry. She didn't say, you should have fought. She knew he'd made his choice when Maggie was 7 weeks old, and they didn't pack up the van for North Canton. She knew he'd made it in 1960 on a painted pony holding Doug so he wouldn't fall. Pete kicked the soccer ball against the garage. Thud, 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 the same rhythm as the judge's stamp. Later, after dinner, after homework, after Maggie's bath, not the pink tiled one, just the beige one upstairs, David went to the garage. He kept a box on the top shelf. Court papers, old photos, Kathleen Ann's funeral program from 1990. He didn't take it down. He did pull out a picture from his wallet, December 1995. All 5 kids on the couch. David Simon's family, Kathleen's oldest son. He set it on the workbench next to the other one, creased and soft at the edges. Him and Doug on a pony, him and Denny and Doug in a tub. 3 photos, 2 inheritances. Heard Kathy in the doorway. You okay? He didn't turn around. Yeah, just thinking. If Grandma Thelma's girls get 31 and a half each, that means he did the math out loud. That means Clem and Thelma must have commingled everything. Kathleen shares, Robert shares, all of it went into one pot. Then the pot went to Thelma's line. Unless you fought it. I didn't. Why? He looked at the 1995 photo. Dan, Beth, Pete, Kate, Maggie. None of them were at the wedding. All of them were here. Because he said, I wasn't fighting for money. I was fighting for that. He nodded at the house. Thud went the soccer ball. I didn't. Why? He looked at the 1995 photo. Dan, Beth, Pete, Kate, Maggie. None of them were at the wedding. All of them were here. Because he said, I wasn't fighting for money. I was fighting for that. He nodded at the house. Thud went the soccer ball. Maggie thinks Uncle Denny and Uncle Doug are just stories about a bathtub. And maybe that's better. Kathy came up beside him and looked at the funny photo. You were so little. So was Doug. She put her hand on his back. You kept him from falling. Yeah, David put the photos back. Still am. He turned off the garage light in the dark. 2120 Hiltonshire Avenue was quiet except for the furnace kicking on and Pete still out back, keeping the ball in the air. Court was in Stark County. The verdict was here. 12.5% to 3 brothers, 31.5% to 2 sisters, and 100% of a Columbus evening to David. Settlement enough.